See you later.
Welcome, everybody, to MCU Later. We are seeing you later. It's been, I would say, a few weeks. Almost feels like it's a month since we've done one of these episodes. And I'm so happy to be joined after all this time. W.H. Park, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? What's going on, Wai? It's actually been a month.
It has, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That seems like it. I mean, the flow of time, sometimes, could feel like an hour. Sometimes it could feel like a year, right?
It can feel like, an analog clock just clicking away and away and away. But, I can understand maybe the idea of time feeling different for you. We're still in this pandemic, so time is really weird, I feel. But also, I don't have to watch, stupid things on Monday nights where, fucking dolls are turning off TVs and shit and making grown mixed martial arts, fighters seem like complete idiots. So that's okay for me. So I don't really have to deal with that stuff. So maybe time flows differently for me than it does for you.
Well, we're here, there will be plenty of talk of time variance and multiverses and splintering timelines. And if there's any indication that we might be in a splintered timeline, I think it is the current course of the creative direction of Monday Night Raw. And somehow we're in perhaps one of the worst timelines where we have the Shayna Baszler being killed by a doll on Monday. But
you ever see that episode of Community where they go through multiple timelines and possibilities and this is the worst timeline? They come to that conclusion. It's a great episode.
I imagine the splintering of this particular timeline must have taken place somewhere either around the Montreal Screwjob, or it could have been in the 80s. If only Cyndi Lauper did not agree to work with Lou Albano for her music video, none of this would have happened.
I think it's all Ghetto's fault, to be honest with you. Like most things in wrestling these days.
Ooh. We are here, of course, to talk about Loki. It is the return of the MCU series on Disney Plus, and I have really I've exchanged maybe a text message or two with you, WH, about it, but I have not really been keeping up with your level of anticipation for the show, really your prior existing knowledge of maybe some of the characters in here. So maybe we should dive right into that. What were your expectations heading into this?
I thought this was probably the most interesting from a character point of view because, for the longest time, Loki was kind of the central villain of the MCU before, Thanos came along. And so he's introduced in the first Thor movie. He's kind of the main antagonist in the first Avengers movie. And then he kind of just, keeps on appearing in, of course, all the Thor films, but he appears in Infinity War and not so much in Endgame, but that's our jumping off point for the series. It's what happens to him in Endgame. But I find Loki to be one of the most fascinating Marvel characters from the comics and in the MCU because I like this idea of a redemption arc for Loki because he's, in Norse mythology, he's the god of mischief. And in a lot of cases, he's kind of like a god of evil as well. He gets up to a lot of terrible things in the Norse mythology, if you ever read that stuff. But in the comics, he's Thor's main antagonist, his main bad guy, and it's interesting because they're adopted brothers, and that whole, idea plays out. There was a great series called Journey into Mystery that was a spinoff from Thor, and it featured Kid Loki, which was Loki reborn as a child. And this whole comic series, it was a year and a half run. It was just Loki as a child trying to redeem himself and not try to go down the path that would lead him to become an evil adult again. It's really fascinating. So I'm really excited that these ideas are going to be explored in this television show.
So for me, I have to say, when I saw the roster of Disney Plus shows announced, I can't really say I was clamoring for, a Loki solo show, because I feel like we've already seen so much of Loki throughout the TV shows. He is not a character like the Scarlet Witch or, even Falcon, who I feel like have been relatively underserved in terms of character development. We've had a lot from Loki. Nonetheless, at the heart of this thing is arguably the best. Well, it's debatable now, but certainly like towards the first half of the MCU, there was zero question about which the best villain the MCU has produced was. From the moment he appeared in, Thor #1, he was just, Tom Hiddleston as Loki was completely magnetic, arguably the best person of that film. And they really lucked out that, the original Avengers story included Loki as the main antagonist, because you couldn't have asked for, more of a home run in terms of casting and in terms of just magnetic lead villain. So that alone, I think maybe the more I thought about it, the more I was interested. But I had no idea really that like they would take that character into this direction, which, for many people or that are aware of like some of the upcoming titles that are coming out, Phase 4 is really going to be based around a lot of stories about the multiverse. We've already had that in, of course, Scarlet Vision, WandaVision, but that is set to continue in the next Spider-Man. Of course, it's set to continue, maybe even culminate in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But this is going to be a series that is going to heavily, talk about the rules of time travel in the MCU and the concept of multiverses. So, WH, what can you tell me about the main institution that we are introduced here in episode number 1, the TVA, the Time Variance Authority?
So the Time Variance Authority was introduced in an episode of an issue of Thor written by Walt Simonson. So he's the creator of the Time Variance Authority. And then when Walt Simonson jumped over to take over the writing and art duties of the Fantastic Four, he involved the Fantastic Four in a time travel story that brought in the Time Variance Authority. And like in the first episode of Loki, we see like kind of they have enforcers, like police officers that do their will, basically. So these are, in the comics, they're called justices. So the main Time Variance Authority cop is called Justice Peace. Then we meet like Justice Liberty, Justice Truth, and other characters in like various appearances of the Time Variance Authority throughout the comics. So actually this whole aspect of like Loki working with the Time Variance Authority, which was a creation of Walt Simonson, who is actually one of the most popular and most famous Thor writer artists in that character's history, was really cool to me, because obviously, Walt Simonson did a lot of stuff with Loki in that run as well. So I thought, it's the two worlds of Walt Simonson colliding in the MCU. That's awesome. What I like about the Time Variance Authority is that they kind of try to streamline the multiverse of the Marvel Universe, which isn't as crazy as like the multiverse of the DC Comics universe. That thing gets really, really crazy. We always usually just focus on Earth 616, which is the main Marvel timeline that the MCU kind of represents as well in live action. One thing that like I really liked about the depiction of the Time Variance Authority in the show was the casting of Owen Wilson as Agent Mobius, which is a character that comes from the comics. And Agent Mobius is an homage, a tribute to, very famous Marvel editor who passed away by the name of Mark Gruenwald, who was the kind of continuity cop of Marvel Universe in the 80s. And so like if a writer submitted a script and said, this is going to happen with Spider-Man and the Vulture and Dr. Octopus and Dr. Doom as well, Mark Gruenwald put his foot down and says, that doesn't make any sense because of what happened in 1977. So you got to change that script. Okay. It makes no sense for what you want to do. An Amazing Spider-Man 213 doesn't jive with what happened with this character in Daredevil 44. Oh shit. Okay. I got to fix that. So that's really cool that, like kind of Mark Gruenwald is being brought to life in live action by, Owen Wilson, who's kind of like, I think doing a good, like, homage to Mark Gruenwald as best as he can, without being parody.
I mean, I think Owen Wilson can't do much besides be a great Owen Wilson, which is more than enough for me. And if I don't know what Mark Grunwald's personality was like in real life, but if it was anything like Owen Wilson's, I guess this what you would call a great homage. The idea of somebody having the role of a continuity cop in any sort of like fan medium is, I think, perhaps a dream job for many people. And if only WWE had their own continuity cop, I think the world would be, maybe we wouldn't be in such a splintered dark timeline. But
you have, it doesn't matter because like the ultimate continuity destroyer is Vincent K. McMahon. He's basically the I'm trying to think of what's a good Marvel analogy.
He's the variant creator. Like he's the guy who's yeah. What is it?
He's Doctor Doom. He's essentially Doctor Doom without being as smart as Doctor Doom. That's what Vince McMahon is.
Doctor Doom. Okay. But what you just described. The idea that somebody essentially like, okay, this is not meant to like be any sort of like slight or negative thing, but when you think of somebody who nitpicks continuity, I mean, to the tiniest detail, a job that I think is extremely important and that I respect as a fan, you would perhaps, some would describe that person as like the nerdiest of the nerds. And I mean that with complete love, and admiration. But as a concept, that seems to be exactly what this TVA is. They are people that are there to call out and to destroy anything that seems to fragment from the proper continuity, the prime continuity of what has been established in the MCU. And as a concept, that is wildly intriguing.
It's this idea that they work for this trio of entities called the Timekeepers that we're also introduced in a wonderful like cartoon voiced over by Tara Strong, who's a great voice actress who's really famous for doing the voice of Harley Quinn in the DC animated projects. I love the fact that the Timekeepers in the comics were created by Mark Grunwald, and then the Time Variance Authority was then created to be the kind of like the enforcers of their will as a nod to Mark Grunwald. So like this, like Mark Grunwald's like influence on this show is very, very strong.
Yeah. So this episode, of course, we're assuming that you've all seen it, but basically the gist of it is, just to refresh everybody, this is a version of Loki that's splintered off of 2012's Avengers. If you remember the events from Avengers Endgame, where in attempting to retake the Tesseract from the events of 2012, Loki, the whole project goes awry, and Loki somehow escapes it. And this is the Loki that we see. So we are watching a Loki that is still relatively fresh in his most evil ways before his character is at all redeemed from the events of Thor the Dark World or Thor Ragnarok or ultimately Avengers Infinity War. So we're dealing with a Loki that is still, very villainous. So he is directly lifted from that scene into essentially this TVA realm, which we don't know exactly where it exists, what timeline it exists. It seems to be completely separate from anything that has been established currently in the MCU. And so we follow the episode as Loki is put on trial for what is called a crime against the continuity. How do you feel like the TVA, in particular, maybe that little video voiced by Tara Strong, explain the concept of like the splintering universes to you, WH? How do you think it worked with like what's already been established with, for specifically, I'm thinking about like the Ancient One's speech to Bruce Banner from Avengers Endgame. Like, how do you think it all tied into? Did it make sense to you? And do you think it was clear enough in presentation?
I think so. I think the beauty of it was its simplicity, that it's designed as kind of like this old style cartoon in a kind of an animation style of like that would be more familiar from things from the late 60s or early 70s, and kind of like one of those things you would watch in school, like a kind of an infomercial, as it were, for like, like don't don't touch those wires that are on the ground, they'll electrocute you, or don't do drugs when you're at all, because they'll fry your brain. That's what it came across as. And it's like, it's designed to be simple and give you the basic gist of what's going on. So I thought the way it was written and presented was very, very clear. Like, this is the premise of the show. This is the premise of the Time Variance Authority. And this is what Loki's going to be doing in, the next, what is it, like 5 episodes are left, right, in this show. And I was like really impressed with it. I like the whole presentation of the TVA. I like the fact that it feels like, it's very analog. It's not digital at all. It's looks like it's an anachronism of the 70s, of an office from the 70s or something like that. I like, because I think it has a timeless quality because of that.
Yeah, definitely. I find the stylistic choices of the way, how do you present something that is supposed to exist in no time period while existing in all time periods at once? I mean, it might as well be everything and everything at once and nothing at once, I suppose. So they went with like a weird kind of like 70s type of look, which makes no sense but also makes sense. There were other like neat little anachronisms throughout, and that would include, I think maybe most interesting is the can of soda that Owen Wilson's character continually drinks. This was identified by very keen viewers as a can of Josta. Josta, WH. Are you familiar with the beverage?
No, I had to look it up, and I thought it was kind of funny that it's like discontinued drink from, I think, the 1990s.
Yeah, this was the Pepsi's energy drink from the 90s, which was only available for a few years. And of course, I suppose it makes sense in this case, because if you're somebody who's jumping through time, well, you probably have access to any sort of beverage released from any sort of time period. And so somehow Mobius ended up probably getting a case of Josta from the 90s, and he seemed to really like it here. It's just a really weird, funny world that, we're immediately introduced to. And, the layers continue to peel back as Loki. Again, we are dealing with a Loki that is still just completely power hungry and believes he himself to be, worthy of the greatest throne in the universe, complete domination. So he is brought into this place where he understands nothing, where his belief to the keys to that domination being the Infinity Stones, he slowly realizes are completely powerless. And I think seeing that character come to that realization and seeing the performance of Tom Hiddleston as going from this guy from Avengers 1 in 2012, I would say a relatively generic at that point villain who's just completely power hungry, to somebody who just completely has to fall to submission in realization that, wow, like, not only am I not a god here, I am completely powerless, and there's an entire world that I know nothing about. I thought that unraveled itself really well.
I think it's a nice play on the title of this episode, Glorious Purpose, which is like his saying, like, he talks about his glorious purpose, like in his appearance in the Avengers, to all those people, like in Germany. And then it's a recurring thing. I forget what the exact wording is. It's like, I'm imbued with glorious purpose. I'm, like it's his destiny, but he feels he realizes his destiny is to die at the hands of Thanos, because he watches his life unfold on a piece of film, which is another great anachronism that, these really super powerful people use film to document someone's life, which I thought was a great touch as well. I think Hiddleston is such a great actor. Like I've loved his work in other projects outside of the MCU. I just think he's one of those really great British actors that's so British, but can do anything, like play any kind of character. That I was really excited. I think one of the things I was really, really excited about for the show was to see more Tom Hiddleston, because I'm such a fan of him as an actor, especially in this role. And it's great to see that he embraces being Loki. He doesn't feel like, I don't think he feels like he's like stuck playing this character forever, because he's able to do other things because he is such a talented actor, that when he's invited to come back, and if the scripts are strong, that he's like, yeah, I'll be Loki again, no problem.
I mean, he seems to be having I would think he would absolutely love playing this character, because I just feel like the performance speaks for itself. You know, at no point do you think this particular actor is half-assing any moment he has on screen. And this series, I think, is complete proof of that. It takes complete advantage of his incredible range in this episode alone. You know, going again from being a 2012 version of himself, just completely power hungry, to somebody who has, has to watch the future unfold as he witnesses the death of his own mother that he caused himself, the death of his father, and then finally his own death. That scene, as he's watching that videotape, was, I would say, it's definitely the emotional peak of this episode, because again, it's like him being visited by his Christmas spirits. He sees all of his sins unfold, and he sees how the rest of his life plays out. What I absolutely loved about it was the camera largely just completely stays locked on Hiddleston's face throughout this entire thing. And you can see the scope of his reactions as he goes through these various moments, and his reactions are just completely magnificent. It tells you exactly what's going on in his mind, like exactly what you would, how would any of us react if we got to witness in footage our own deaths and the deaths of our loved ones in the future. It was actually quite powerful, and not something I really expected in like what really started off as a bit of a comedic sci-fi type of thing.
I think the way the episode was structured as far as like Loki's arc goes, first of all, so we see his escape using the Tesseract from Endgame, and then he drops out of the sky into the Moby Desert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the way
the Gobi Desert.
I've got Mobius on my mind. The Gobi Desert, and then the way that scene is shot is very similar to like how we see Tony Stark in the first Iron Man film after he escapes from his captors in the cave, and then he crash lands the Iron Man armor in the desert. That scene, those scenes are very, very similar to one another. And then the whole process where he's kind of stripped and like going to be put in like his prisoner clothes is very similar to what happens to Thor in Thor Ragnarok when he's get the haircut and being presented to the arena like for the pleasure of the Grand Master. So I thought just running those parallels with Tony Stark with Thor, his adopted brother, was like, okay, so this is where we're looking at a redemption arc, because that's Iron Man 1 is a redemption arc for Tony Stark. Thor Ragnarok is kind of a redemption arc for Thor. And so like these are clearly signaling this is Loki's redemption arc. And then we get to the scene where he watches his own death and kind of realize about himself, like he voices what Mobius wants him to say, is that I don't enjoy hurting people. I just do these things because this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because this is like my fate, and then but he's not, and he thinks he's a villain, but then Mobius says, you're not a villain, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those specific moments, of course, are, I mean, what in wrestling we call the babyface turns. They are, the moments where the villain shows a level of heroism, or at least a submission within them that leads to heroic acts. And this is really interesting because we are going to be seeing a very different Loki progressing throughout the series, one who is aware of his fate and is completely honest with himself at the end here, where he says he admits to basically using fear and intimidation because it's what the weak do to control people. So he's very much aware of his bullying ways, and you would expect will somehow overcome those urges. But of course, this being Loki, inevitably, I'm sure things will turn back to mischievousness, mischief. I mean, but the end of this episode, and we'll talk a bit more about some of the details, but just to talk about overall plot itself, the end of this episode has Owen Wilson trying to convince Loki to join him on his quest to stop this mysterious killer that has been killing a number of the TVA crews throughout various timelines. And by the way, they're called Minutemen here. The TVA agents or the TVA troops here. They're called Minutemen. Not like the Watchmen, but different type of Minutemen.
If only they were like the Watchmen.
Well, if they're jumping universes, I do think contracts, and a lot of that will probably prevent that one from happening. But
Yes.
But we are told by Owen Wilson that he needs Loki's help to go on the hunt for his suspect that is doing all of this killing, Loki. So we have two Lokis potentially appearing in this universe, or at least in this series. Any predictions about what this other Loki, or who this other Loki might be?
It's Del Rusk, obviously. The Red Skull. It's the Red Skull, obviously.
Is it Del Rusk, or is it Mephisto, or is it Magneto?
So, I think is kind of funny is like, if this show, I think all these shows are kind of done like concurrently. I think this,
it's not Mephisto. Then the writer, the director has confirmed that, because it was just a coincidence. And this was all, like you said, this was all pretty much produced at the same time as WandaVision, so it's not Mephisto.
Yeah. So I mean, the whole idea where in France, where the child says, like when Owen Wilson asked the child in France, who did this? He points to the portrait of the devil. I just started laughing. I was like, oh, if only this was, this was made way after WandaVision appeared. Like they wanted to let's just throw that line in. Let's make people think it's Mephisto. I don't think it's Mephisto. I don't think Mephisto exists as such in the MCU. But one thing I thought was funny was like when you see the silhouette of this variant that they're hunting, that they want to recruit our Loki to hunt, that Owen Wilson says is a variant of him. So it's another variant of him, because the one we're seeing right now, our hero, is a variant of what what's supposed to happen. But he's just, the way he's dressed, the silhouette, the hood, the cape, is very similar to what the Red Skull wears on Boromir in Infinity War and in Endgame. So I just thought that was funny. So I sent you pictures of that saying...
But is that not just a default look, guy in a hood? Like, is that not just a default look you give anybody, any mysterious figure in any TV show?
I guess, but you know what? You really went too far with your response, saying when you showed me a picture of Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian, I'm like, dude, you do not cross franchise streams at all. Okay, that's just the wrong thing.
Well, first of all, it's the multiverse. Okay, anything can happen, and secondly, yeah, exactly. Like in the Star Wars, like Obi-Wan, like anybody you put in a hood is supposed to be like, it can be anybody. It's Vince McMahon. It's Vince McMahon. It's the higher power.
Oh God,
that's who it is.
But I'm saying, again, if it's the Red Skull, if it's Del Rusk, victory lap, on your left, all day, every day.
You're just going to be calling Del Rusk in every project. Like Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Del Rusk is going to have something to do with it.
We see some hooded character, could be him. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we shall see, WH, but, some of the other notables maybe throughout this, I really loved the whole D.B. Cooper gag, and I'm somebody, I did you know who D.B. Cooper was? Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah, for sure.
I had no idea, so I had to pause it and read it up, and the idea that they somehow worked in this mystery of this man from the 70s who hijacked a plane and somehow disappeared, presumed dead, but not confirmed. Somehow they weaving that into like, because here's the thing, like they tried to basically, like in Owen Wilson's interrogation, tried to like call Loki out for all of his sins of the past, and unfortunately, with this version of Loki, the only footage you really have to use is in Avengers #1, and I guess a bit of Thor #1, which they didn't really go too much into. So they in order to like, this Loki's supposed to be like 1,000 years old, and so to call him out for like all of his sins of the past, they had to make some up. And how can you make something up, for that would mean anything to anybody? So they used an existing story, and they basically, it's like when they gave Magneto credit for the the JFK murder, right? Remember that?
Vaguely, yes, but yeah.
Or like, did he save him or something? No, they explained that he was trying to save JFK because JFK was a mutant.
Remember. I can't remember now. This is all from First Class.
It was either from it might have been, or Days of Future Past, one of the two. Anyway, so I thought it was a brilliant way of like tying in some real history to give that character like a depth of story, and it was just a fun little scene.
I wonder if this is going to be in every episode where it's like, oh, that mystery that is completely unexplainable, that was Loki.
It would be a great way to teach people like me a bit about history. What did you think about the blue gum, kablooey? Did that mean anything to you?
Not at all. No, I just thought it was a nice like, oh, here's an anachronism. This kid in like I forget what time period he's in. He's like in the 17th century or the 16th century in France, and he's eating like bubble gum. Who gave you that? Oh, the devil, Loki, or the Red Skull. Could be. We'll see who it actually is. I here's the thing. I don't know if it's actually a variant of Loki. I think it would be interesting as part of his redemption story if he faces a really super evil version of himself, and that would like kind of fully complete his Bayface turn by defeating the super heel version of himself.
That would be interesting. We are going to maybe get into some discussion about like I don't want to talk about any sort of like confirmed leaks or anything like that, but like I do want to talk about speculation. I do want to talk about rumors. And there has been some rumor that a female Loki has been cast. Lady Loki is a character from the comics. So this could be possibly a female version of Loki that's running out there. And another thing that I guess has been somewhat confirmed is that if you see, I guess, a close-up of like Loki's document somewhere in the show, it confirms that Loki's gender is fluid, which I believe is carried on from the comics, but also, I mean, the man is a shapeshifter, so he could take the form of anybody. So we shall see if that unfolds. But what were any other main things you wanted to point out from the episode, WH?
Back to like the kind of aesthetics of the TVA, when there's that scene where Loki and Mobius are walking kind of like in a hallway to go from Loki's like holding cell to the place where he's going to get interrogated and show his life film. There's a point where they just stop and Loki just looks at the TVA, like their whatever dimension or world that they exist on, and he's just like awed. I loved how it's designed to look like a sci-fi like paperback cover from like the 1950s or 60s or 70s. It's just like so timeless. I just thought I got to find out who did this matte painting, because that's what I think it's, or digital painting, whatever it is. I hope it's a matte painting. That would be awesome. But I just love the feel of that. And I just think it just adds to this like great aesthetic production design that the TVA kind of like is trying to go for, and I think is really like hitting all cylinders with. Other things I really liked about this episode, I don't like. There's so much to unpack. Honestly, I was watching several videos about it on YouTube, and I thought a lot of them were good. The idea of Lady Loki is actually really interesting, because what happened in the comics was like he was reincarnated. All the Asgardian gods went through Ragnarok, and then they were reincarnated, and like Thor had to go around and like kind of find them in their reborn forms. And what happened was that Loki, the way he was reborn was he took over the form of Sif, Lady Sif. He took over her body, so he was brought back using her body as a female. And that was really like kind of the conflict for Thor, because Sif is one of his romantic interests in the comics. Like, oh, my greatest enemy, my evil foster brother is in the body of a woman I loved. So we'll see if maybe the actress who played, Sif is going to be Lady Loki.
That would be very interesting. One of the scenes I really loved was when Loki was attempting to grab the Tesseract, and inside the drawer was a bunch of Infinity Stones. And I just felt like that was such a great way of telling all of us in the audience that we were completely done with the Infinity Saga, because there are simply far bigger problems in this world. Powers that, exceed beyond what, is being trivialized now as paperweights. Like objects that we've spent 10 years with these movies chasing after, causing mass destruction. They are being presented here as mere paperweights. So being told that, hey, there's a far more interesting, maybe far bigger, problems ahead. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about, WH, was the idea that, in the video itself, talking about branching timelines, the reason why the TVA wants to stop all of these splintering timelines is because there is a fear of some sort of war between the timelines that I guess, at once existed, and thus the TVA was established. Do you think this is a direct reference to Secret Wars?
I think so. So the idea is that a war between the multiverses did happen, and they're trying to prevent that from happening again. But in the comics, what the Timekeepers really want to do is maintain a timeline that ensures that they're created, because they're created in the future, and then they have the ability to go back in time. So they're created in the future, but they're created because of certain circumstances happening in a timeline that they must ensure all these events happen. Nothing, no variants happen from that, because then it's going to create this big problem. So that could also be a false flag, and it could be just like the Timekeepers are, hey, we need to make sure this Loki doesn't exist and these other variants don't exist, because that will screw up the timeline that creates us. Because maybe they only exist in one timeline. They're not necessarily a Nexus character that exists in different timelines as themselves, right? There's no variants of them. It's just like the Scarlet Witch is supposed to be a Nexus character that exists in different multiverses as like a singular version of herself, right? So maybe that's the kind of thing that we're going to see here at the end of this series. Who knows? But Secret Wars, for people who don't know, was like a miniseries that, basically what happened was that the Ultimate Comics line that created like the Sam Jackson version of Nick Fury, and like kind of like this more kind of updated version of the Marvel characters, and the traditional Marvel universe, the 616 universe, collided in Secret Wars. And like basically what happened was that they emerged out of that. So like you have now Miles Morales, who was an Ultimate Universe character, became part of the regular Marvel Universe Marvel Universe. And then we could have, Miles Morales Spider-Man comics in the regular, Marvel continuity. So I don't know, like we have necessarily that problem here, unless they want to say, that Sony universe stuff, we're going to merge it. We're going to have a war with Sony. And then we already won the war with Fox. So we're now going to have a war with Sony, and then merge everything into the Disney Marvel MCU, like cinematic, live action universe.
So like Secret Wars in the comics was like created, and we're talking about the second Secret Wars, like the one that took place like just maybe a few years ago, not the original one from the 80s.
The 80s, yeah, not the one with the Beyonder now.
No, but like that Secret, I mean, these events are done by comic book companies to basically clean up all these different types of like confusing, timelines, and also like systems that they have, so that they can put all their most popular characters into one timeline, one universe, so that they can all interact with each other. And I actually do feel like we are in the same position right now in the MCU, where there's just so many different properties lying around, so many contractual splinterings that are going on. Like we know we're getting another Spider-Man, but who knows if we're going to get another one after that with what's that kid's name? Tom
Holland.
Tom Holland, yeah. So there's that's a potential big mess with like, Sony wanting to fold Venom and fold all that other stuff in. You have the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, who, even though Marvel has them, I mean, the X-Men are it's not just one group of characters. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of characters that have so much of their history steeped in the, like, it's going to be really tough to say mutants are just existing, because like mutants can't just suddenly appear, because you have, characters that you'd be missing out on, like Apocalypse, perhaps even like a Magneto, or people like a Wolverine that are supposed to have existed for hundreds of years. Would it not be easier to say, okay, Secret Wars, boom, all these places are going to war with each other, and then the end result is that all of these long histories are valid. You can have Avengers, the Infinity Saga, side by side with, like Wolverine being 100 years old, or Apocalypse being the first mutant. Some sort of cleaning up, I think, is in store for the MCU right now, and maybe the Secret Wars is their key to that.
Maybe. Like I don't know if they're gonna, when they're gonna do something like Secret Wars. Like if they want to do something where you have different franchises battling against one another. Because the MCU's main franchise is the Avengers, obviously, right? Like, so when the X-Men do show up, and I think it's a matter of when, not if, like, okay, so this this franchise in the comics and in live action that has so much weight and history to it. How is it gonna coexist with the Avengers franchise? Is it gonna take it over? And then we have to fold in the Fantastic Four, which doesn't have the kind of weight in live action that it does in the comics, but you know that it's something that is important to Marvel Studios, that they want to make everything that they do successful, including like these different franchises that they eventually want to blend in, along with Spider-Man. I don't know, like I would, if I'm Kevin Feige, I'd want to like kind of explore Peter Parker as a character growing up as Tom Holland gets older, make Peter Parker an adult. I never want to see another thing where he's back to being a kid again. I never want to see Spider-Man's origin ever again in a movie.
No, we don't really need that unless it's like wildly different, but no.
I never want to see Batman's origin ever again. Just get, like the beauty of like the Tim Burton movie, and the only really good thing about that movie is the fact that we don't necessarily see it's not focused entirely on his origin. It's just like, he's Batman. He's been doing it for a while. Let's go. Let's keep going. Right.
Mm-hmm. A bit of more information. Since this is the first episode, we should talk about some of the creators here involved. And so people who have been doing a lot of interviews this past week are the writer and director of this project. And we'll start off with the director. Her name is Kate Herron. She has worked on Sex Education, which is not a series I've seen, but clearly doing a fantastic job in this first episode with the way that the show looks, with the way that the way she filmed and edited that particular scene of Loki having to live through his entire life. Are you familiar with any of the work that she has done?
Not really, no. But I'm what I like about like her and the other directors of the Disney Plus series is that they're going to direct every episode, and which I think just adds this cohesiveness to each series. Like WandaVision was Jack Schaefer directed every episode. I forget her name, the director of Falcon and Winter Soldier. She directed every episode. Like they would get different writers for each episode, but the director is always the same person, which I think Kate Herron's going to be doing every episode as well, which I think is great. But I'm not super familiar with her work as opposed to like the writer Michael Waldron.
Right. Carrie Scoglin, by the way, was
Carrie Scoglin, yes.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But yes, Michael Waldron is the writer of this series, and I suppose his most famous credit would be Rick and Morty, having written, I think, 10 episodes throughout one of their series. He's also worked on Community. Most interesting I've found, though, of his credits is Heels on Stars. And if that sounds familiar to you, wrestling fans will know that as the Stephen Amell project that is set to debut on Stars. And in hearing Waldron in interviews, he revealed himself to not be a comic book nerd growing up. Instead, his favorite nerddom was pro wrestling. So, that might tell us a lot about maybe what we can expect in this. In particular, I listened to one interview today of him on the Vanity Fair Still Watching podcast, which is a great podcast, which I recommend. And he talks about how what he loved about pro wrestling was the fact that there was lasting effect, to characters' motivations. It wasn't like the Power Rangers, which was the other reference he gave in this point, where he says like sometimes he would watch an episode of Power Rangers, and the next episode it would feel like nothing would happen. But whereas he says if Hulk Hogan turns heel, well, that will have lasting ramifications for the rest of his life. Now, I don't know if Michael Waldron keeps up with modern day professional wrestling.
Doesn't sound like it, to be quite honest with you.
He might have a very different opinion. But nonetheless, this is a wrestling fan now in charge of a very, not only is he in charge of writing Loki, apparently Kevin Feige really liked this guy's work because he tapped him immediately off of this project as it was still in production to write the latest draft of Doctor Strange 2, The Multiverse of Madness. Which, for those of you who maybe are unfamiliar, that movie was originally to be directed by the director of the original Doctor Strange. But After creative differences, he left the project. Sam Raimi came in, and they needed a new script. And Kevin Feige must have really liked him because Michael Waldron will be the one responsible for writing that script. So you can potentially expect a lot of bleed over from this series to Doctor Strange 2.
I gotta imagine part of it is that like Kevin Feige must have loved how he used the multiverse in Loki. And it's like, you got the grasp of what I want to present, this idea of the multiverse. Like, it seems like the multiverse is the Infinity Stones of Phase 4, right? And then
Definitely.
And then like maybe like Kang, this character that we're supposed to get in the Ant-Man and Wasp movie, is going to be the our Thanos maybe of this phase. But maybe like Waldron was just so great and articulated everything Kevin Feige wanted to see about the multiverse. He said, "You're doing the Multiverse of Madness movie because you understand it, and this is what I want from it." And then boom, because I think that's how most of the scripts are written. Kevin Feige has, this is the idea I want, make it come true to the writers, and then they present the scripts like, that's perfect, let's go with that.
It must be something to that effect. Not only did he get this guy to write the next Doctor Strange film, Kevin Feige got this guy to write Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie. Some of you may not be familiar, but Kevin Feige is set to produce his own Star Wars film, not based on the any sort of like main episode, but I believe just his own film that is part of that universe. And he got Michael Waldron to write it. So this guy is very busy, and man, it's given me, if anything, I will say, like, all of this has made me a lot more excited for that Heel show than I ever thought I would be, because I honestly wasn't probably even going to check it out. But
you and Brandon from New Jersey can review it.
Is he a big is he anticipating Heels?
Listen, that guy's always like, hey, maybe I can be on a show. I mean, hey, Brandon, if you're listening, actually you are listening to this, it'll never happen on my watch. But hey, hope lies eternal with other people who work at Post Wrestling.
Maybe Brandon and I can start a car review, because he was giving me tips on how to fix my Civic today. So
I wouldn't trust him with anything.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd take my car to him. Maybe I would. So yeah, that's some of the information about the creators of this particular show so far. But it sounds like it gets your thumbs up, episode 1.
Definitely. I'm very excited about where this is going. I really want to explore the Time Variance Authority. I really want to see how Loki fits in with this organization. I really want to see what version of Loki we get at the end of this series.
Let's get to some of your feedback. And if you're listening to this, whether or not you are a patron, by the way, we are releasing this for patrons a day ahead, but this is episode 1. We are going to release this one for everybody on the free feed a day later. So if you're listening to this on Saturday, you can get all of these episodes by signing up to the Post Wrestling Café at postwrestlingcafe.com. We start off with Barack from the UK, who says, I really enjoyed this first episode. I was not aware of the Time Variance Authority, not having read the comics, but the amazing Jetson-style animation explained it all perfectly. The episode succeeds in setting out the aim of the series, taking down the variant Loki, which we did not get with the previous first episodes of WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. No doubt there will be praise for Tom Hiddleston's performance and the emotional scene where Loki tells Mobius he kills people out of fear and has a bit of a cry. But let's discuss these characters in the MCU that we have grown to love for their charisma, despite them being hugely problematic. Loki murders Agent Coulson and the attempted genocide of Earth. Baron Zemo, terrorist who blows up a building and murders King T'Chaka. Yondu, child trafficker and accessory to the murder of thousands of children. Does the fact that they are entertaining to watch on screen mean we should forget all the evil they have committed previously on our screens? I've often wrestled with this one. What do you think, WH?
They're all fictional characters, so it's fine. It's like, listen, Kenny Omega ruined New Japan for me for several years, but he's in AEW now, so I'm okay with him now.
But you still hate him, though.
I do still hate him, but he's not in any wrestling federation that I watch anymore, so it's okay.
It's an interesting question, Barack, and one that I certainly, like I wouldn't extend this to a real life comparison. You know, if anybody like Loki has done what Loki has done in real life, I don't think there is any forgiving that person, no matter how entertaining they were in a time cop heist situation. Same with Baron Zemo, you know, somebody who kills a leader of a peaceful nation. I don't care how well you dance. I don't care how funny you are on the dance floor. I'm not gonna,
What was it? Are they really a peaceful nation?
They're not setting wars on other. They're just keeping them themselves. Wakanda. Yeah, I would say they're peaceful. Sure. What, you're saying he deserved it? WH.
No, I just like to throw out controversy out there.
Yeah. Well, listen, because it's comics, it's like, hey, man, ultimately we need to get to our matchups, right? Like, you have to make the heel very villainous. You have to absolutely hate them. And how do you make us hate them? By having them threaten genocide. And then you want to keep making money, so you turn them babyface, and you just kind of have a bit of selective memory about that genocide.
I can't wait for Thanos to come back and be a babyface. It's gonna be
awesome. Are
awesome.
You kidding me? He's already there for a lot of people. He's top babyface Thanos.
Listen, in the comics, when Thanos is presented as the protagonist, I love it. I just think it's right. Don't go back to him being like the bad guy again. I like him much more as the guy who fights the bad guys. Anyways.
Brandon from Oshawa says, this was a great first episode. I'm a huge time travel nerd, so I'm definitely on board, and I expect this to be my favorite of the Disney Plus shows. I was a bit confused, though. If the Loki with the TVA is the one that vanished with the Tesseract, who is the one at the end supposed to be? Well, I think we're supposed to believe that is another Loki from a different timeline, not the one who vanished from the Tesseract. I mean, we're talking about multiple timelines, multiple Lokis, infinity Lokis,
I think this is also going to play into the What If series when that eventually, comes about. We're going to because we're going to look at different timelines, like variant timelines, part of the multiverse, through the eyes of Uatao, the Watcher. So it's this multiverse theme is like just the overall, story device that we're going to be exploring for the next 2 years.
It really is brilliant. And maybe let's just take a step back from the feedback just to kind of, again, give Marvel Studios their props. Because, how do you top, this 10-year arc circling around these Infinity Stones? And I feel like this concept of the multiverse, we've only seen small glimpses of it, in these Disney Plus shows. But I feel like they've done a great job of making me already very interested to see how all of these pieces are going to fit together into what will, be the end game maybe 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's the great thing is that Marvel has a plan to dovetail all the movies into a one massive 2-part movie. Maybe it's going to be a 3-part movie for this phase, 4-part movie, who knows? But we don't know what that is right now. We know that we're at the start of it with the shows and the new movies that are coming out, including Black Widow, including Shang-Chi, including the Eternals, and mixed in with what's happening on Disney Plus. As a fan, I think it's really exciting to see wow, the groundwork is being laid for what? I don't know, but I'm excited to see what it is.
Hey, what did you think of the Eternals trailer?
Oh yeah, I thought it was like a Benetton ad.
It kind of had that vibe, sure.
I don't know. I didn't think it really told us too much about what this movie is going to be about, which is good. I'd rather go in with fresh eyes and not have things spoiled for me. But I like the fact that it's very, very much playing up the fact that we have pretty diverse cast in terms of people's ethnicities and different, a nice balance of genders in the show. So I'm really excited to see what the story of this movie actually is, being so familiar with the comic book characters.
See, I'm not familiar with the comic book characters, and I'm going into this completely cold, and I kind of want to stay that way. I when this thing is released, I'm hoping I know nothing about it, and just see if I can let the movie speak for itself. I mean, at this point, Marvel knows that most of you guys are probably going to be in simply because it's a Marvel show. You slap that label on. I'm most interested in seeing how Chloe Zhao is going to handle an MCU project. I mean, the buzz going around is that this is like one of Marvel's best films. It's the buzz is going around that this could potentially be an Oscar contender, and of course, Chloe Zhao is the defending best director on the planet, having won for Nomadland this past year. So, I'm just excited for that.
Well, it looks like she has more of a James Gunn type relationship with Marvel than a Edgar Wright type of relationship with Marvel.
And that's a good thing, yes.
That is a good thing.
We got a PJ River who says, I'm just going to say that I loved it. I love the pacing and the characters. I usually love Owen Wilson. Big sci-fi fan. Good callback to the Stargate Sliders types of shows. Yes. Scrump. Initially, this was a show I was least looking forward to. I love the character of Loki and felt him sacrificing himself for Thor in the opening minutes of Infinity War to be beautiful. Then when they announced his own spinoff, I felt like it was just a cash grab, and I'm so happy to be wrong. I love the multiverse being introduced and how Loki fits into it. Owen Wilson's introduction into the MCU is a fun one, as he seemingly fits right in with the aesthetic of the TVA, and the aesthetic of the TVA is visually stunning. Question. With rumors of the next Avengers movie adapting the Secret Wars comic from 2015, will Loki have a second chance at returning to the MCU proper now that he's a changed man? I hope not, WH. Like, I'm happy to see this. I'm happy to see this series. I'm happy to see more of Tom Hiddleston as Loki, but this series has to end with him dying. Because I'm sick of, like, or at least returning to his timeline never to be seen again. Because, like, it really is already a bit of a joke, right? How many times can somebody die and then come back?
It's comics, way. It's like, it happens all the time. Like every time they kill a character in the comics, Superman's gonna die in this next story arc. No, he's not. He's gonna be gone for the arc.
That's why nobody gives a shit anymore about like deaths in comics.
Yeah, I mean, no one's gonna give a shit about deaths in comic book movies either. Like. If Loki, aren't they already talking about doing a second series of
I believe
Loki?
so. That was the rumored.
But if he's like an agent of the time, like if he becomes like the Marvel Universe version of fucking Doctor Who, like where he's just time traveling and trying to fix shit like throughout timelines, okay, and he never meets, the mainstream Marvel heroes ever again, like he's like in the shadows and he like helps them, but they never see him. I'd be okay with that as well. Like, I see what your point is, and I agree with it. But at the same time, I don't really care that much if he comes back to the MCU proper as well. Because it's like, anything related to comic books, I don't take that seriously, to be honest with you. Like, if they brought back, Natasha, Scarlett Johansson as a Black Widow and brought her back to life, I would be fucking happy about that.
Oh. Stipulations matter, WH. All right, loser leaves town. They can't come back. It can't be a female version of that wrestler coming back to town. No, it doesn't work like that.
Imagine if it was not Mr. America, but it was Miss America. That would have been funny.
That would be great. The only way I would be excited about a Hulk Hogan return. Finally, we got a Morgan from Ottawa who says, Loki's off to a strong start. I was right at home with Hiddleston's return to a less reformed version of the titular character. The introduction to the TVA was neat, and it's such a big deal to hear Tara Strong play Miss Minutes. Owen Wilson was terrific, and the settings look fantastic. I also love the scene where Loki binge-watched his entire arc from the first Thor to film to Infinity War, as it felt very This Is Your Life. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if there was like a Disney Plus logo, like when he was watching that film?
That would have been great. Or if there's like a little Mickey Mouse, like dressed as the character from Fantasia, that would have been great too.
Of course, yeah. Anyway, were there any things? Oh, do you have any comic recommendations?
I have 3, actually.
Whoa. Yes.
Should I get to them? Okay, so the first one is called Loki, Agent of Asgard, the complete collection, written by Al Ewing. It's kind of the similar concept to what we're seeing in the TV show, except he's not working for the TVA. He's working for his mother, Frigga, as kind of like a one-person secret service in service to Asgard, to protect Asgard from covert threats to the realm eternal. So that's kind of like the similar idea to what we're seeing here in the Loki TV show, but just not for the TVA. But if you want to know more about the TVA in comics, then I recommend 2 collections involving the Fantastic Four. One is called Fantastic Four Epic Collection Into the Time Stream. This is the introduction of the TVA, kind of after, it's like their second appearance after they're introduced in an issue of Thor by Walt Simonson, who also is the writer and for the most part artist of this run of the Fantastic Four. So it collects Fantastic Four number 334 to 346, which are like kind of pivotal episodes of the Time Variance Authority here. And then the one after that is called Fantastic Four Epic Collection, the New Fantastic Four, which collects Fantastic Four 347 to 361. And this actually has a great storyline drawn by Arthur Adams, one of my favorite comic artists from all time, introducing the new Fantastic Four of Spider-Man, the Grey Hulk, Wolverine, and Ghost Rider. If you ever never read that version of the Fantastic Four, it's kind of fun. It doesn't make any sense, those four characters working together, but it's kind of fun. It's just basically a cash grab, but it's a fun cash grab. I recommend it highly.
There you have it, everybody. You got your assignment, and pick them all up. If you need some of those titles, again, they are all in the show notes at postwrestling.com. Sometimes, like, there also is, they should be in your podcast app, but like every app displays the notes differently. So if you want to just see them in perfect HTML, go to postwrestling.com for that. Were there any other things that are on your mind, WH? It's been a while since we've caught up with you. So what are you up to lately?
So I've gotten my first shot. I'm just waiting to hopefully move up the date of my second shot, so I'm fully vaccinated. I feel that way. I feel even more anxious about getting fully vaccinated because we are opening work up to the public, or as I like to call them, the wildlings, the ferals. They're going to be allowed into the store to shop, but like our store capacity is like 25 people, and and so I imagine the line outside to get into the store is going to be super insane. So that's going to be interesting to see how that folds out over the course of the next week or so.
Oh man, WH, have you enjoyed the time I guess away from the creatures?
The ferals? No, like this is my second time. This is my second lockdown. You know what I mean? So like in November we were locked down, then we reopened, and then we got locked down right before away, again. So because like honestly, it's not a sustainable business model, to do only curbside pickup when you're making, like a tenth of what you normally make a day. It's not, and you can't keep like, you can't pay the employees. I don't want anyone to lose their job, including myself. So no, I let's reopen the store and let's people in. I think we're going to do very well money wise, but it'll be great when we're out of this entirely and like we can let people in, as many people as possible. And like, I don't have to wear a mask all the time, except when I'm on the train. I'm still probably going to wear a mask on the subway because like, that's just disgusting to be on one of those in general. So
I probably might do the same. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like, especially in the winter, I just like it. Like, it just keeps me warm.
It does keep you warm. It keeps your mouth moist. Like, one of my big problems is like I have dry skin and like, your lips get chapped. Like I always carry, lip balm with me, but like that mask helps a lot for like just keeping your face moist.
And like, I'm also somebody who's like a very awkward smiler. Like sometimes I have to, like if I see my neighbor, it's like, like I have neighbors that I talk to, but then I have like the other set of neighbors who I never talk to. So we just make eye contact. And sometimes I have to give an awkward smile. And my awkward smile is just like really bad. So like if I have a mask on, it's just like I have an excuse to not do it.
Well, I'm glad you said that because like that's something I've always noticed about you. I'm just, I just didn't know how to bring it up, but because I sometimes like we'll talk, you'll smile, and I'm like, did he think that was funny what I just said, or is he just humoring me? I don't know.
With UWH, it's always genuine. I genuinely find you to be a very hilarious person, and you know what? Whenever I'm ready, I'm going to definitely drop by the B&B. It's a place I've missed. I highly encourage everybody to, if you're in the Toronto area, go to the B&B on Bloor, buy a comic book, buy any sort of book.
Listen, you're friends with the manager of the store. Like, if you want to do a little private shopping, I'm sure if you send him a DM, he can probably arrange that for you.
Is that right? Okay. Well, maybe I'll have to do that. It's been a while since I've seen the both of you, so maybe if maybe we'll even meet some postmarks that are out there. So again, if you're listening to this, if you go to the B&B on Bloor, first of all, wear your mask, sanitize, and say hi to the man himself.
Don't say hi to me. I don't want to know who you are. Like, don't. Hey, are you WH Park? Don't say that to me. I will just bury you on the next episode of whatever show I do.
Okay, then maybe show up in the most ugly clothes that you own so that WH will notice you. You won't even have to say hi because the radar is strong on this man.
If you're Eric Marcoche visiting from fucking Nicoland or in Ontario, I forget the fucking place where you're from.
Sudbury.
Sudbury, right. If you come up to me and say, I'm Eric Marcoche, I think it looks French, so I'm calling you Eric Marcoche, just so you know. Like, I don't want to know. If you're at a post wrestling get together, that's fine. Don't come to my work and introduce yourself because I was just like, oh God, one of you. Ugh.
He plays hard to get, everybody, but deep down, he is using fear and intimidation because it's how he likes to control people.
It's true. It is true. The only people I acknowledge: Dan the Mouth Lavransky, John Pollock, yourself, and maybe Jesse from the Six. Maybe if he's getting over the loss of his loser choker Maple Leafs again this year. I laughed at that, by the way, just so everyone knows out there. But maybe that's the only group of people from the post wrestling universe that I would acknowledge in real life at my work. That's it.
Wow, happy to be on that VIP list. Well, thank you, WH. I've honestly genuinely missed having these conversations with you every week. So I look forward to speaking to you every Thursday, exclusively for patrons of the Post Wrestling Café. Think about signing up, everybody. It is still towards the beginning of the month. You really sign up at any time of the month. You get access to all of our archives, including all of our editions of MCU Later, talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision. Me and John, we've done reviews of every single MCU film that are out there in the archives. In addition to that, Rewind Away, Rewind a SmackDown, Ask Away, New Japan Pro Wrestling reviews, and access to the forum. Just my firstborn child, I'm sure. I'm going to be giving up some access to, Post Wrestling Cafe patrons. So we give all we can here to all of you. So any last words, WH?
I can't wait for you and John to do your next Combat Sports review on the series of Undisputed movies. That'll be fantastic.
Undisputed movies? What do you mean?
You don't know about the Undisputed series starring the awesome Scott Adkins? It's these underground fighting things set in prisons. It's awesome. They're great movies. Fantastic. Look them up. Brandon from New Jersey is yes, I love those movies.
No, perhaps that'll be his next pick, and which we will promptly shoot down. So, thank you everybody for listening. Until next time.
MCU later.